In his luxurious apartment, Jack stood holding the delicate invitation to his ex-girlfriend Claire's wedding. The news of her upcoming marriage affected him more deeply than he'd anticipated. Claire had ended things a year ago, saying he was too absorbed in work and never prioritized her. Now, as he stared at the invitation, Jack felt a swirl of sadness and bitterness. The thought of attending the wedding alone made him dread it even more. Later that day, as he walked through the lively city streets, he noticed a woman sitting quietly on a corner. Her clothes were worn, her hair unkempt, yet her face held a warm, kind smile. There was something dignified about her that caught Jack's attention, making him pause for a moment longer than usual. "Hi," Jack said, approaching her. "I'm Jack." The woman looked up, surprised by his friendly approach. "Hello, I'm Rose," she replied softly, her smile warm but cautious. Jack couldn't explain why, but as they talked, he found himself drawn to Rose's quiet strength. She spoke with grace and intelligence, revealing that while life had thrown her tough challenges, she had kept her kindness and hope. The more he listened, the more he admired her resilience. Then, on impulse, wanting a companion at the wedding and curious to shake things up, he asked, "Rose, would you come to a wedding with me? My ex is getting married, and I could use some company. I'll make sure you have a nice dress, a good meal, and a chance to experience something different." Rose blinked in surprise. "You want me as your date to a wedding?" she asked, not quite believing her ears. "Yes," Jack nodded. "Why not? You deserve a day to feel special, and honestly, I could use the company." She hesitated for a moment, weighing the odd but intriguing invitation, then with a small smile, she agreed. "All right, Jack, I'll go with you." Neither realized then that this decision would set off a chain of events that would change their lives forever. True to his word, Jack took Rose to one of the city's most exclusive boutiques. As they entered, her eyes widened, taking in the luxurious displays of designer dresses, sparkling jewelry, and elegant shoes. For a moment, she felt out of place, but Jack's reassuring smile gave her the confidence to move forward. At first, the boutique staff glanced at Rose with curiosity and indifference, her worn clothing and weary look unusual for their typical clientele. But once Jack made it clear he was there to help her find a perfect outfit, their attitudes shifted. They presented their finest dresses, shoes, and accessories, treating Rose with the care given to any wealthy customer. Rose felt a whirlwind of emotions, excitement, nervousness, and disbelief, as the staff worked their magic. They styled her hair, applied makeup, and dressed her in a stunning gown that seemed tailor-made for her. When she finally looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked elegant, poised, and beautiful, but more importantly, she felt a spark of confidence she hadn't felt in a long time. As they left the boutique, Rose turned to Jack, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Jack. I've never felt like this before. It's overwhelming, but in a good way." Jack smiled back, genuinely pleased to see her transformation. "You deserved it, Rose. You're more than what life has shown you." Later that evening, in a quiet cafe, Jack and Rose opened up to each other. She shared her story, explaining how she'd once lived a regular life before a series of unfortunate events, including losing her job, left her on the streets. She spoke of the loneliness and hardships she'd faced, but also of the small acts of kindness from strangers that had kept her going. Jack listened attentively, feeling immense respect for Rose's resilience in the face of hardship. In return, he opened up about his own struggles. The pressure to succeed in his career had led him to neglect his relationship with Claire, and he was still dealing with the guilt and heartache from their breakup. For the first time, Jack felt he could share his emotions freely, without fear of judgment. As they talked, a genuine connection blossomed between them, one based on mutual respect, empathy, and understanding. They found comfort in each other's experiences, realizing that despite their different backgrounds, they had both endured challenges and emerged stronger. The day of the wedding arrived, and when Rose stepped out in her beautiful dress, she looked completely transformed. Her change wasn't merely physical, she now held herself with renewed confidence and dignity. Seeing her, Jack couldn't help but feel proud of the journey she had undertaken in just a few short days. "Are you ready?" Jack asked, offering his arm. Rose nodded with a determined smile. "Yes, I am." Together, they left the apartment, prepared to face whatever awaited them. Arriving at the grand venue, they stepped into an elegant hall filled with well-dressed guests, glittering chandeliers, and a soft melody from a live orchestra. As they entered, it seemed like time slowed down. Heads turned, conversations halted, and all eyes fell on them. Rose, with her newfound poise and stunning dress, walked beside Jack with confidence. No longer was she the woman from the street corner. She was someone who belonged, someone who captivated attention. Murmurs began, spreading quickly through the crowd as guests exchanged curious glances, wondering who this beautiful, mysterious woman was and why Jack had brought her. At the far end of the room, Claire, the bride, greeted guests with her new husband. But when her gaze landed on Jack and Rose, her smile faltered. Rose's presence was a shock, and the way Jack looked at her, as if she was the only one in the room, stirred an uncomfortable feeling within Claire. As Jack and Rose moved through the crowd, he introduced her to several guests, each introduction met with polite yet surprised smiles. Despite sensing the curiosity and judgment behind their glances, Rose held her head high, maintaining her composure. Eventually, Claire approached them, her expression polite but tense. "Jack, it's good to see you," she said, casting a quick glance at Rose. "And you must be—" "This is Rose," Jack responded warmly. "She's my date for the evening." Claire forced a smile, though her discomfort was obvious. "Rose, it's a pleasure to meet you. You look lovely." "Thank you," Rose replied calmly, her confidence unwavering. "Your wedding is beautiful." The atmosphere between them grew thick with unspoken tension. Claire struggled to keep her composure, feeling a mix of jealousy and regret. She'd expected Jack to arrive alone, perhaps looking sad, but he seemed happier than she'd ever seen him, especially in the company of this woman who seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. As the evening progressed, the orchestra began to play a slow, romantic tune. Jack turned to Rose with a smile. "May I have this dance?" Rose hesitated briefly, but the warmth in Jack's eyes gave her the courage to accept. He led her onto the dance floor, and as they began to move, Rose felt herself relax. The music, the elegance of the setting, and the gentle rhythm of the dance made everything else fade away. But not for Claire. From the sidelines, she watched them, her heart sinking as she observed the ease with which Jack and Rose moved together. Her jealousy was sharp, but so was her regret. Seeing Jack with Rose made her question whether letting him go had been a mistake. For Jack, however, the dance was a revelation. Holding Rose close, he realized that his impulsive invitation had grown into something far more meaningful. Rose was not just a stunning companion to make his ex jealous, she was someone he truly valued. The emotions that surfaced within him during that dance were new and surprising, and for the first time since his breakup with Claire, Jack felt a sense of peace and joy. As the song ended, he looked into Rose's eyes, recognizing that their night and their journey together was just beginning. What had started as a simple act of defiance was evolving into something deeper, something real, and it was only the start of a story neither could have foreseen. As the evening continued, the tension in the room grew almost palpable. Claire, trying to keep up appearances, found herself increasingly fixated on Jack and Rose, unable to look away. Every time she caught sight of them, she felt a pang of doubt about the choices she had made. Claire tried to suppress the wave of emotions she'd been holding back, but finally, she couldn't ignore them anymore. She found Jack standing alone by the garden entrance, away from the bustling reception hall. "Jack," she began, her voice tense, "could we talk for a moment?" Jack, sensing her unease, nodded. "Of course, Claire. What's on your mind?" Claire hesitated, searching for the right words. I didn't expect you to bring someone like Rose here. She's clearly not from our usual circle, and I'm concerned about how people might interpret it." Jack frowned, surprised by her remarks. "Claire, Rose is a wonderful person. She may not come from wealth, but that doesn't define her value. Why should it matter what others think?" Claire's mask of concern began to slip, exposing a hint of jealousy. "I just don't want you to get hurt, Jack. You've already been through so much, and I just think—" Before she could finish, Rose, who had overheard enough, stepped forward with a calm but resolute expression. "Excuse me, Claire," Rose said gently. "I couldn't help but overhear. I know I'm not what you expected, and that's all right. But Jack invited me here because he saw something in me that others often overlook. We all have our pasts, and we all deserve a second chance. I'm here tonight not just for Jack, but for myself, to remind myself that I'm more than my circumstances." Claire was momentarily speechless, caught off guard by Rose's calm yet powerful words. She had anticipated Rose would feel intimidated by the opulent surroundings, but instead Rose stood firm, her gaze steady. Jack watched Rose with growing respect and admiration. He realized then that Rose was far more than just his date for the night. She was someone who had overcome adversity with strength and resilience. Nearby guests, who had been subtly observing, now saw Rose in a new light. What had started as whispers of judgment turned into admiration. Rose's composure left a lasting impression on everyone present. Claire, visibly flustered, mumbled something about needing to get back to her guests, and quickly excused herself, leaving Jack and Rose alone in the quiet garden. Jack turned to Rose, his expression softening. "Thank you, Rose. You didn't have to do that." Rose smiled gently. "I wanted to. You've given me so much tonight, Jack. The least I could do was stand by you." At that moment, Jack realized he no longer cared about impressing Claire or anyone else. His focus had entirely shifted to Rose, the woman who had not only supported him but had done so with quiet strength and grace. Later, as the reception neared its end, Claire approached Jack once more, finding him near the edge of the dance floor, watching the remaining guests mingle. She hesitated before stepping closer, a vulnerability in her gaze that Jack had never seen before. "Jack, can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft and trembling. Jack turned, his expression open but unreadable. "Of course, Claire. What's on your mind?" Claire took a deep breath, gathering the courage to voice what she'd held back all evening. "Since I saw you with Rose tonight, I've realized I made a mistake leaving you. I thought you were too focused on work, that you didn't have time for me, but seeing you tonight, I regret ending things." Jack was surprised by her confession. He hadn't expected her to express regrets, especially not tonight. But as she spoke, a sense of calm washed over him. Listening to her, he recognized that the emotions he once felt for Claire, the pain of their breakup, had transformed into something lighter, easier to release. "Claire," Jack began gently, "I appreciate your honesty, but the truth is, I've moved on. What we had was meaningful, but it's in the past. I found peace with that." Claire's eyes shimmered with a mix of sadness and acceptance. "I see," she murmured, her voice almost inaudible. "I'm sorry for how things ended, Jack. I wish you the best." Jack gave her a small, genuine smile. "Thank you, Claire. I wish you happiness too." As she walked away, Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders, finally feeling a sense of closure. He had always feared that seeing Claire again would be painful, but instead, it had brought him peace. Unbeknownst to them, Rose had overheard their conversation. She had been passing by, heading toward the garden for a moment of quiet, when she caught Claire's confession and Jack's response. She paused, her heart a mix of relief and uncertainty. She was glad that Jack had moved on, yet a small voice in her mind wondered, was she merely a part of his journey to let go of his past? Rose walked out to the garden and found a quiet bench to gather her thoughts. She had grown fond of Jack, but doubts began to surface. Did he truly see her for who she was? Or was she just a symbol of his newfound freedom? Sitting in the cool night air, Rose knew she had to find out. She couldn't let herself be just another chapter in someone else's story. If she was to move forward with Jack, she needed to be certain that he valued her for who she was. Gathering her courage, Rose found Jack standing alone in the garden. "Jack," she began softly, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "I need to ask you something." Jack turned, noticing the seriousness in her gaze. "Of course, Rose. What's on your mind?" Taking a deep breath, Rose continued. "Was I just a part of your plan tonight? Was this about making Claire jealous? Because if it was, I need to know. I can't be just a tool for someone's closure." Jack's heart sank as he realized how his actions might have seemed. He had been caught up in the evening's emotions without considering how Rose might feel. Moving closer, he looked at her earnestly. "Rose," he said gently, "I'm so sorry if I made you feel that way. That was never my intention. When I first invited you, I'll admit, I was reacting to my own emotions, perhaps with a bit of pride or defiance, but what I hadn't anticipated was how much I'd come to admire and care for you." Rose looked up at him, searching his face for any trace of insincerity. "So this isn't about proving something to Claire?" she asked. Jack shook his head, his voice firm with conviction. "No, it's not. Claire is part of my past, and I found closure tonight. But with you, Rose, you've shown me a side of life I didn't know I needed. Your strength, kindness, and the way you've handled everything tonight made me see things differently. Claire isn't on my mind anymore. It's you and the chance to know you beyond tonight." Rose felt a surge of relief and emotion as Jack's words resonated with her deeply. She could sense his sincerity and, for the first time that night, let herself believe in the possibility of something real. "Thank you for being open with me," she replied softly. "I care about you too, Jack. I just needed to know this wasn't a fleeting thing." Jack took her hand gently, looking at her with warmth. "It's not, Rose. I can't say what the future holds, but I want to spend more time with you and see where this leads." In that moment, they both understood this was not about the past, but a beginning of something genuine. Looking back at the reception, where guests continued dancing and chatting, Jack felt a desire to leave the superficiality behind. He glanced at Rose, noticing she felt the same. "How about we get out of here?" he suggested with a smile. "Let's spend the rest of the night somewhere quieter, just us." Rose's smile was warm, and she nodded. I'd love that, she replied. Together, they slipped out, leaving the critical eyes and whispered judgments behind. They stepped into the night, ready to face the future, hand in hand, on their own terms. Gathering her courage, Rose found Jack standing alone in the garden. Jack, she began softly, her voice steady but laced with emotion. I need to ask you something. Jack turned, noticing the seriousness in her gaze. Of course, Rose. What's on your mind? Taking a deep breath, Rose continued. Was I just a part of your plan tonight? Was this about making Claire jealous? Because if it was, I need to know. I can't be just a tool for someone's closure. Jack's heart sank as he realized how his actions might have seemed. He had been caught up in the evening's emotions without considering how Rose might feel. Moving closer, he looked at her earnestly. Rose, he said gently, I'm so sorry if I made you feel that way. That was never my intention. When I first invited you, I'll admit, I was reacting to my own emotions, perhaps with a bit of pride or defiance, but what I hadn't anticipated was how much I'd come to admire and care for you. Rose looked up at him, searching his face for any trace of insincerity. So this isn't about proving something to Claire? She asked. Jack shook his head, his voice firm with conviction. No, it's not. Claire is part of my past, and I found closure tonight. But with you, Rose, you've shown me a side of life I didn't know I needed. Your strength, kindness, and the way you've handled everything tonight made me see things differently. Claire isn't on my mind anymore. It's you and the chance to know you beyond tonight. Rose felt a surge of relief and emotion as Jack's words resonated with her deeply. She could sense his sincerity and, for the first time that night, let herself believe in the possibility of something real. Thank you for being open with me, she replied softly. I care about you too, Jack. I just needed to know this wasn't a fleeting thing. Jack took her hand gently, looking at her with warmth. It's not, Rose. I can't say what the future holds, but I want to spend more time with you and see where this leads. In that moment, they both understood this was not about the past, but a beginning of something genuine. Looking back at the reception, where guests continued dancing and chatting, Jack felt a desire to leave the superficiality behind. He glanced at Rose, noticing she felt the same. How about we get out of here? He suggested with a smile. Let's spend the rest of the night somewhere quieter, just us. Rose's smile was warm, and she nodded. I'd love that, she replied. Together, they slipped out, leaving the critical eyes and whispered judgments behind. They stepped into the night, ready to face the future, hand in hand, on their own terms.